We begin tonight with the declaration of a state of emergency in the nation's education sector being considered by the federal government in a bid to revive it. In addition, the government plans to set aside 15% of the budget to fund education at all levels. These are some of the recommendations by an ad hoc committee saddled with the task of pulling the education sector out of the woods to the National Economic Council meeting chaired by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, in Abuja. Our State House correspondent Ibrahim Adra reports.
It's the 92nd National Economic Council meeting, and Vice President Yemi Osinbajo is presiding. The council received various reports, amongst them one from the ad hoc committee on the revival of the education sector. The committee is sequel to a presentation by the Minister of Education to the council in June of this year. During its work, the committee considered several factors that constitute stumbling blocks on the path of the nation's educational objectives. It came out with recommendations on out-of-the-school children, technical and vocational education, promoting ICT and boosting library services, among others.
The committee recommended that all governors to declare a state of emergency in the education sector in their various respective states and demonstrate the commitment to revamp education. Also, the committee also recommended the federal government and state to allocate a minimum of 15% of the state budget or federal budget to education in order to revitalize that sector.
The council says it will review the report and will require details to take a final decision.
While the interim report is being reviewed by the members of council, a more detailed report prepared and presented at the next meeting when decision will be taken on the proposed recommendation.
The Minister of Sports also briefed the council on preparations for the upcoming National Sports Festival.
He called on governors to support the process by preparing their participants on time, transporting their participants to the venue, giving adequate security for the participants.
There were updates on the economy and the efforts of the federal government to keep poliomyelitis at bay through active implementation of the Abuja commitment.
The school account as at 16th October 2018, which stood at $2,090,215,686.66.
Main soft spot for polio immunization weakness is in the Northeast, where routine immunization and campaigns have been disturbed by the unrest in there. We have received very good cooperation from the military in being able to reach these areas and ensure that the majority of children are covered.
The Ministry of Health has since July of 2017, through the National Emergency Routine Immunization Coordination Center, continued to drive strategies to improve routine immunization. From the Presidential Villa, Ibrahim Adra, Channels Television News.
Without education, a nation is regarded as living in the dark ages, which is why the concern about Nigeria's education sector is apparent. The number of strike actions by teachers and students over wages and tuition are just a few of the problems bedeviling the sector. This report examines the problems of the education sector.
If this quote is anything to go by, then the future of Nigerian students is far from attaining the status of brightness. Not with students expecting to assimilate anything in dilapidated structures and incessant strike actions by teachers over wages to break the chain of the learning process. There's also the hike in tuition, which leads to protests by students whose parents already have it tough with other economic demands.
Our school fee was being increased by a range of 500%, which is unaffordable for the masses.
Like me now, my dad is a policeman, an inspector, collecting almost like 72,000 naira, and we are three in our family in that school. I will be paying 150, my younger brother will be paying 180, while my sister, they're just getting admission 120.
There's also also been allegations of unwillingness to fund education thrown at the federal government.
The budgetary allocation to education at the federal level is far cry from the UNESCO recommended 26% of annual budget.
A look at the budget allocation directed to education since 2014 appears to indicate a reluctant commitment by the federal government to develop the sector. This is also seen in the amount reserved for education in the budget since 2009. So the recommendation to declare a state of emergency by the committee set up by the National Executive Council in the education sector seems to be a step in the right direction. But without the sincere willpower by those in authority to fix this, the mind of the nation may be heading to waste. Orolu Ashonibare, Channels Television News.
Now let's move over to some other issues. And ahead of the 2019 general elections, the National Security Council is concerned about the proliferation and stockpiling of weapons by people it describes as disgruntled elements. This came up today when President Muhammadu Buhari met with security chiefs to assess the security situation in the country as it relates to the conduct of the polls. President Muhammadu Buhari chaired the meeting that had service chiefs, the Inspector General of Police and the Director General of the Department of State Services, among others. The meeting discussed post-election violence as it fears desperate politicians may whip up ethno-religious sentiments to incite violence in the country. The Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, who spoke to State House correspondents after the meeting, gave Nigerians the assurance of adequate security ahead of the polls.
Obviously, guarantees that, what I would say is that every Nigerian obviously should be committed to a free, fair, and credible election. That's the main issue. Every Nigerian has that responsibility, and obviously I'm assuring Nigerians that we'll do our best to provide adequate security for these elections. But presently, of course, look at the last election we had in Osun State. Now, just what we did in that one state, we are going to replicate it in all over the Federation.
The issue of a new minimum wage for Nigerian workers appears to be far from being resolved and has continued to generate controversy between the organized labor and the federal government. A director in the Ministry of Labor, Mrs. Omaibe Akpan, maintains that the federal government is still negotiating a new minimum wage with leaders of the various unions and would only sign an agreement that will be implementable. However, the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Ayuba Waba, insists that there is no going back on the minimum wage increase being pushed by the union, and negotiations with the government have been concluded. They were both speaking on our breakfast program, Sunrise Daily.
A very important aspect of determining minimum wage is the ability to pay, or the employers to pay. Now, it's not just federal government. We have state government, we have the organized private sector. As you know, as at today, some state governments have not even been able to pay the one that was agreed in 2011, the 18,000. And so they have accumulated unpaid salaries. So it's important that the parties reach an agreement that is implementable.
When the 2010 minimum wage was implemented in 2011, every state implemented it. What happened was, at the eve of 2015 election, we knew what happened. Many of the states emptied their treasury, some also overborrowed, coupled with the challenge in the economy. So to say that we have not considered, that's why Labour had to, from its demand of 16,500, now agree, through consensus, to a mere 30,000. We have even, in the case of federal government, put up some advices that can actually put more money in the hands of government. One is the issue of saving from wastages. We refer to the report of the Auditor General of the Federation, where it is reported that over ₦1 trillion have actually disappeared. We said recover this money. The report of NIATI is there.
To security matters now. A policeman and 2 civilians have been killed in a shootout between security forces and suspected militias in Zakibiam town of Benue State. The police public relations officer, Mr. Moses Yamu, who confirmed this in a statement, said the suspects, reportedly dressed in police uniforms, approached the area on motorcycles to seek refuge in the town. According to Mr. Yamu, the suspects were fleeing from troops on Operation Whirlstroke before they were intercepted by security forces, after which a fierce exchange of gunfire ensued. In the course of the gun duel, a police officer as well as a woman and boy sustained fatal injuries and were later rushed to the hospital where they died. The police command is giving residents of the town the assurance of their safety, noting that efforts are being made to arrest the suspects and bring them to book. In part two, after the break, PDP supporters protest alleged disbandment of Osun State Election Petitions Tribunal as party demands immediate reconstitution of court. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.